Okay, guys, welcome back to another exciting episode of How I Built This Birmingham Style. Of course, I'm the host, Ron Holt, CEO and founder of two consumer service-based brands right here in Birmingham, Alabama. One called Two Maids and a Mop, and the other, if you look behind me, is Pink Zebra Moving. Man, never heard of that before because we only have one location, but we're real excited about what we're building. One of my passions, as you know, is talking to people that have a purpose in life. I believe that's why I was put on this earth, is to not just make money inside of a business, but to use a business to create opportunities to fulfill my own personal dreams and to also help others capture their own personal dreams through entrepreneurship, through the opportunities that business success creates. And I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs along the way that you've had a chance to hear and see. But today we have a phenomenal guest. Micah McElveen is from the Birmingham area. He operates a mission called Vapor Ministries. Vapor Ministries creates sustainable centers for third world countries. And through that, there's so many things that it does. There's a lot of entrepreneurship opportunities that are created. There are a lot of educational opportunities that are created. There's basically anything that you can imagine that's really needed, and there's really poverty-stricken communities. Vapor Ministries is there to support that need. And they do it all with a home base right here in the Birmingham, Alabama area. And so today, this is a huge honor. Micah, thank you so much for participating in this show. I can't wait for everyone to hear your story and be inspired by it like I was when I first heard it.
Man, my privilege. Glad to be with you and our viewing audience.
Absolutely. All right. So Micah's story, I'm going to let you kind of share this. I didn't want to tease too much of it in the early bio there. I'd love for you to kind of take people back to those early days, even when you were just a teenager, and how those early formative years have allowed you to build that mission in life that you're leading today.
Yeah, well, I had a near-death experience, so that actually changed things for me. I was actually found dead. So my personal passion in life, I love to play ball, but my goals were, I would say, accolades and assets, right? I wanted to be famous and I wanted to be rich, and sports were my ticket to get there. And so my dad, he coached high school ball for 18 years, and he got me after a practice, and he said, "Son," he said, "life isn't about a game." He could see that I was, totally sold out to something that was fun, was enjoyable, but shouldn't dominate all my attention, right? And so he said, "Son, God's made you on purpose, for a purpose, and success is selling out to that plan for your life." Now, truth be told, on the outside, I was kind of doing one of those head nods, okay, yeah, he's dad, he's coach, he's AD.
Sure.
But on the inside, man, I wanted to be a light-skinned Deion Sanders +1. You know what I'm saying? I figured I played quarterback and free safety, pitched and played shortstop, played point guard basketball. And I want to be prime time, but I want to go 3.
Right.
And the real wrestling match was this whole idea of, would I surrender to the purpose of a higher calling that God had for me? Or was I going to orient all my life's energy around my gain and my glory? Was it going to be all about me? I'm gonna draft the plays, I'm gonna run them, and I'm the end of them all. Like it's all about numero uno. And so as my father had that conversation with me, it really crystallized that internal tension. And so late one night before a big ball game, I'm wrestling with God about 2 a.m. I stand up in my room and I said, "God, this is my life, and this is what I want to do with my life. Just leave me alone." So not too long after that, we went down to catch some waves. Man, we love surfing. We'd spent a good portion of our younger years on the West Coast, picking up big waves. We'd moved to Florida. My dad was AD and also a basketball and football coach. And the only time you can ride waves in this big pond out there, we call it the Gulf of Mexico, right? But it's really a lake, right?
Right.
So the only time you can ride waves is when the hurricanes would kick up surf. So my brother and I went down, big beach break. I was racing as fast as I could. I ran down and I dove into this wave. And as soon as I hit the water, something happened. it was like a shock just raced through my body. Instinctively, I knew to lay still, like something was off, but the momentum of the dive kind of carried me through the water. And I remember being kind of groggy, and the next wave, it rolled me over, and I could see the surface, I could see the air. When I tried to get up, my body won't work.
Mm.
So here I am underwater. Every fiber in my body is fighting to get to the surface. And in a last ditch effort, I put my lips together, and I got water instead of air, and I passed out.
Mm.
So my body actually got caught in what's called a longshore current. I was pulled under and down. My brother, he doesn't think anything's wrong, so he goes and gets the football. He's waiting for me to come out. After a few moments pass, he actually walks down to the place where I dove in, and he looks out in the water and he can't see me. He thinks I'm playing a joke, so he actually leaves, begins to go look in the bushes, and every moment that passes, I'm dying. So my parents, they had parked the car, they dropped us off, parked the car, made their way down, and they find my brother, and he's frantic. They ask him what's going on. They have this conversation. They join the search. And to make a long story short, a mom's worst nightmare. My family looked down the beach, and they saw a stranger 150 yards down in a slack pool of water, and he's lifting a hand on a corpse. So my mom hit the beach just screaming, "God, don't take my son." My dad ran down, pulled my body out of the surf, and began to do what he knew of CPR. Eventually, my brother got my mom up. They ran in the nearest house, called 911. You know the stories, right? EMTs, defibrillators. I was put on a helicopter. And I don't remember much of the first week, but I remember choking on something, and I kind of gagged too. And when I came to, I was in ICU, sensors all over my body, had no idea where I was, couldn't move anything. I remember looking over in the corner of the room, and I could see my father, bags under his eyes, hadn't shaved. And the first words out of my mouth, "How did I do in the game?" And my dad looked back and he said, "You didn't play. You broke your neck." It shattered 4 vertebrae in my neck. I was totally quadriplegic. On October 9th, 1995, God taught me very personally that life is like a vapor, like a mist that appears for a moment and vanishes away. And what he helped me see is that at the end of the day, life is a gift, but we have one life to live, and we'll either waste it or invest it. And waste it was the track I was on. My gain, my glory, all about me. To invest it was to live for the good of others, the glory of God, to actually orient my life around the very purpose for which God had given me breath in my lungs. And so that's a little bit of my journey of discovering that there actually was a purpose, and really that I needed to be surrendered to it and invest myself in view of things that are more important than just simply getting mine. So
you're a teenager at this time, and
yes, sir.
So much in front of you in an instant, in a moment of just teenage joy, it just almost vanished. And I can't imagine the kind of pain you went through, not just you, but your family, just not knowing what the next day might be. I can understand how tragic that can be for you and as a family, as a family. But what happens after that? We thank goodness, thank to God that you are here. You made it through that. You survived this horrible accident. Like you said, you couldn't move. So I'm assuming there were weeks and months of just intense rehab. At what point did you start to look in the mirror and see a different future than what you had already seen prior to that?
Yeah, great question. I think so. To your point, there was a process. I was in ICU for a week, in the hospital for the better part of several months, chronic pain, rehab for an extensive period, in a wheelchair for a long time. You can see the halo scars on my forehead. I was in a halo and then an Aspen neck brace for 6 months. So I actually didn't move my head for 6 months. So there was definitely pain, process. But I think the heart of your question is when did that start turning from like a tragedy to actually a purpose, something meaningful? And so the way I would answer that is, I initially was taught in a very real way this reality that life is a vapor. So that came quick, right? Like, I'm not immortal. Like, life is short, it's fragile. And so that lesson was learned quick and early. What started happening through the recovery process was this discovery of, hey, but I still have life. And while it's fragile and while it's short, what if I were to live it in a way that it could outlive me? What if I could root into something bigger than me, and whatever he gives me back, begin to invest that into what will actually matter when I'm not here? And for me, because faith was very a part of my journey, I began to see in what I believe is God's word, the Bible, things that began to give me direction. And as you look in the Bible, it's very clear that God's heart for people, God's heart for the poor. And so I began to say, hey, if I'm gonna still have life, then part of that life's energy needs to be directed towards people that are struggling from a resource standpoint. Began to learn about the poorest sectors of our world and learn about some of the physical struggles that people face. So this idea of, man, I'm here, life is short, I need to invest it. Okay. God says to care for the poor. Okay. Let me learn more about that. So that started to form a sense of direction. The other thing I began to see in the Bible was just God's heart for people to be connected with him. Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. He calls the found to join him on mission. And so I say all that to say, these two ideals began to direct me. This idea of, let's meet needs and let's feed souls, and let's just do it in a way that brings honor to God. And that is actually the purpose statement of Vapor. So the vision statement, the 50,000 foot thing that guides us as a working ministry and guides my life, came out of this process of recovery. And yeah, so it's simply said, our purpose, my purpose, our vision is meet needs, feed souls, elevate God. And that came through the very journey and the discoveries along the way that we're talking about.
When I talk to people who want to start a business, who are unhappy in their corporate job, or just unhappy with their life, what I often hear and see, and I can look in the mirror and see it myself 18 plus years ago, there's a nauseating, there's something wrong. There's something that physically sometimes feels wrong, but certainly mentally and spiritually feels wrong. And you said a bunch of key words there that I have talked to people before to try to find. The words invest, direction, purpose, mission. All those things really don't just change you as a person, but change every really one around you. And so I don't know if you can take yourself back to when you were a teenager and going through this transformation, but I'm assuming that when you were winning the trophies and the baseball games and so on, there was a lot of personal triumphs that made you feel good. It was fun to win and be the best player. Compare the two joys, the joy in winning the tournament versus changing someone's life. Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to lie, man. Pitching a no hitter, 16 strikeout game, and feeling the rush, and playing QB.
Is that real? You did that?
Yeah.
Oh,
wow.
I mean,
in like little league, we're talking about small ball, right? But
still,
those types of things, man, highs, the camaraderie, the locker room, and love those things. Wouldn't trade those things. But yeah, man, having, we're getting to serve right now hundreds of thousands of people on a weekly basis in East Africa, West Africa, and Haiti. We have 550 team members serving the poorest of the poor, and having lived in Africa now, and getting to come alongside people that their life is on the line, like their kids won't make it to tomorrow, or find people like Velma living in a 12 by 14 home, dirt floor, 12 people sleeping in it, and getting to come alongside her and help them improve their quality of living and help them make a connection to a God that loves them. I mean, that it as good as the time on the mound was and as enjoyable as that was, man, it just pales in comparison to see lives physically and spiritually transformed, to see people actually, team members find their purpose fulfilled and getting to be on mission with us in Africa and Haiti, to see even stakeholders who say, hey, we run businesses, we own things, but we actually want to make a difference in places of the world that we may never go, and to see Vapor be a vehicle through which they can effectuate themselves in the world. Yeah, to see those types of things, people getting joy out of the transformation that is either happening to them or is happening through their generosity and through their efforts. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't trade that, brother. I wouldn't trade that.
I love it. And so at some point during this transformation, like we keep talking about, you were investing in other people's lives. You wanted to improve their lives, bring them closer to God, bring yourself closer to God. At what point did you find the single mission of building these sustainable centers in different parts of Africa?
Yeah, I was working on a master's in grad school. We were doing inner city outreach in the community I was in. And my degree was in basically cultural anthropology, cross-cultural communications and studies. I was learning about issues that were dominating the globe: extreme poverty, people trying to survive on less than $1.25 a day at the time. And so what happened is I entered a period of just kind of prayer and fasting and discernment. And I decided during that period that, man, I need to go over into another context to Africa. And I'd known what inner city poverty looked like from the standpoint of serving and ministering inside of urban environments, which need our touch, and we need to continue to serve and reach, right? But I'd never been to what's called extreme poverty. I never firsthand experienced that. And so Christmas break, I fly over, and I stayed for a month in one of the poorest communities in Africa. And it's hard to explain, but man, it was like my heart got broke. I remember walking through the streets and seeing these children playing, raw sewage running through the street, a perforated pipe blowing up, water and sewage mix, and them sitting in it, rags on their body as if it was a sprinkler, and then having these flashbacks to how we would play in the yard. I remember coming across this trash dump and seeing these three boys. One had like rags of clothes on him. The other two were half naked, stick in his hand, digging down in the dump. And he reached down and he began to feed himself off the refuge in the slum. And here you have 300,000 people in this community trying to survive on less than $1.25 a day. And what happened was the human conditions began to break my heart. Statistics took on names and faces. Poverty became personal. And I knew coming back from that experience that I was going to spend the rest of my life trying to forget what I saw, or spend the rest of my life trying to do something about it. And so here you had this ideological perspective, right? God cares for the poor. God cares for those that have not been connected to him through Jesus. Like, so we want to meet needs, we want to feed souls. But now all of a sudden it wasn't ideological. It was highly personal. People that became my friends, people were living in situations that no human being should. And I began to think, like, God, what would I want someone to do for me or with me? How would I want someone to come alongside of me if I was trapped in a space like this? And the story of the Good Samaritan, right? Two passed by, but the Samaritan ultimately came alongside someone who was broken in need and said, look, let's do this together. Let's get you out of this. And so, so God just birthed the vision for the ministry, the operational, like the mission for the ministry on the back of this full experience. So He taught me my mortality, the brevity of life, life's a vapor. He opened my eyes to the ideal of investing it. He showed me his heart for the poor and the underreached. And then all of a sudden it became personal when human beings, brothers, sisters, boys, girls, people, kids, no different than yours and mine, when they moved from being stats on a page to actual people, it became my problem. And so I actually came back from Africa, dropped out of school, and I actually moved into my car, and I lived in my car for 8 months, and Vapor was birthed in the backseat of my car. So,
wow. I mean, I don't even know. I don't even know what to say. That's such a powerful story. I can't imagine seeing that, and not really at the moment, not really being able to do much about it, other than be a witness to it. And, we talk about direction and vision. I can't think of a more noble mission than what you just talked about. All the businesses and enterprises that have been created from that experience have contributed so much good to our world, our society.
Yeah.
What does Vapor look like today?
Yeah. So as an entity, we actually go into third world environments, extremely poor environments, and then we buy property and we build a center. And the center is a place from which social, spiritual, and economic impact transforms the community. So if you think a center, you have on the economic standpoint, we have small businesses and small business training, and then we capitalize and build out those small businesses. And now it creates employment in the community, and it creates a product for the community. And they're also able to deliver that IP, the knowledge that is key for running small businesses. So that's one part of what happens at a center. The second piece is the social. So water, food, education, and health services. Last year, by the grace of God, we served 56 million cups of cold water, 1.8 million meals served, 254,000 people received health services. So like this idea of like, let's meet basic need while we create economy and help people form small businesses that they work in and glove. And then overlaying all of that is spiritual transformation, spiritual formation. So at our centers, you have life on life disciple making leagues. So we create a place where children, youth, and adults can do what they love, play their sport of choice. And while they're there participating, they're hearing about the one that loves them. And then we have mentorship, we have development. So you're raising up indigenous people that are spiritually and from a leadership standpoint equipped to solve problems, transform their own communities. So today, by the grace of God, we have centers in East Africa, West Africa, and Haiti. Our smallest center is on about 8 to 10 acres. Our largest center is on about 17 acres. And there are these hubs of hope that are transforming lives, hundreds of thousands of people impacted on a weekly basis. And amazing businesses, churches, individuals here in the US who say that type of work needs to happen. They help fuel it. And those donations, that support joins our micro enterprise revenue, and it creates a more sustainable revenue stream so we can advance mission. So, yeah.
So to put this into practical terms, we talked a little bit about this off air. You've got farms in different parts of the world. You have gyms, you have schools, you have healthcare centers, and then here locally in the state of Alabama, you have thrift stores, and that's probably where most of the visible recognition, brand recognition comes from the Vapor Ministry. Am I missing something? Is there something else?
Yeah. So when you think about like a center, so you think about a 17-acre center in Haiti. Inside the context of that center, you have sports-based disciple making, and then you have those poverty alleviating outlets. You got water wells and education ongoing. And then you also have micro businesses that are working on that center. So inside the context of a center, right, you have all these services being offered on site. And then stateside, because we don't have extreme poverty here, like we don't have people surviving on less than $1.25 a day. What we do stateside is we do form some small businesses, thrift store, which create employment, serve the community, but they also generate revenue that helps sustain the international extreme poverty outreach. So
what is that in terms of just people? What does that organization's reach look like? Not the serve part, but the people that are employed and work with you guys.
Yeah, so we have 550 team members right now globally. The vast majority of those are African and Haitian brothers, brothers and sisters. Over 470 of our team members are indigenous people that are now gainfully employed, making a difference, transforming their communities. And then we have team members around 50 in our thrift system. And then we have folks in our that work here at HQ. I'm calling from my office and at headquarters. So yeah, so serving hundreds of thousands, but team members around 550, and then to date, there's around 1,000 contributing donors that say, hey, we want to help, whether that's a small business or individual well-wisher that say, or church that says, we want to help the mission happen. And so we consider them a part of the team too. But the vision that we have ahead of us is we believe over the next 10 years, we're going to move from serving hundreds of thousands to actually directly impacting millions. And with that, our employment will be over 1,000, and there'll be a lot of growth needed over the course of the next 10 years.
So much to unpack there. One heck of a story. I don't know if you can go back to those early days and think about some of the more business related issues, like just ramping up.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there had to be some type of supply management issue just because of the transcontinental logistical issues you had to experience. It makes my business seem pretty simple and easy. Hearing about your organization, but what were those early days like? You had this big idea, huge vision, and really bold plans for the future, but you were one man working in a car. What was it like just to tell the world that this is what my future is going to be, and then going to do it?
Yeah, good question. The way I would answer, let me try to get that together. So the early days, what was it like? Because we had a big vision, we were trying to execute it. So maybe I'll walk into that by some of what took place or what we did kind of next. So I dropped out of school, moved in my car, and then we filed for a nonprofit. We got our nonprofit status. We assembled a board, crystallized the vision, and then I actually traveled over 40,000 miles around the country, sharing the vision with anybody that would listen, any church, any school, any company, anybody that would listen. And so, so that was our first stab at some marketing and sales, I guess. Right. And then, the back office was run by my then girlfriend, now wife. We had contracted a firm that was actually receiving contributions. It was an accounting firm to make sure finances were managed right. But my girlfriend would actually run down and get the actual checks and take them and put them in the bank. And she was, managing, payroll. I was a single paid employee, right? Was working with that firm to do that. It was Micah Mac@hotmail.com, no web page. So she would take the emails I would send and she would print them and hand them out and redistribute them. So like when you think of like an effective marketing plan, when you think of, back office strategies, when you think of all that, like, this was raw. Like Panera was my office, my home was my car, and my salary was $746 a month for 4 years. So it was a very humble beginnings. Really never should have gotten off the ground, but by the grace of God, it did.
So how during that ramp, I guess we'll call it kind of ramp up, how many rejections did you receive? How many people said stop? Did your family say stop?
Okay, I'll take those questions one at a time. So first, how many rejections? Way more than I could possibly count. So for every one yes, I would guesstimate, man, I had 100, either don't even bother calling back, or no, we're not going to support, or not taking that kid's call. So there was a lot of rejection. I had to learn to be okay with people not necessarily believing in the vision.
Because you're in your 20s, right? You're still.
Yeah. Yeah, man. This is my first job out of college, living in my car. Yeah. And then family, my family is fully behind what I'm doing definitely to date. There was a sense of, are you sure about this? I don't know that this makes the most sense. I don't know if this is the highest value use of your skills. And, had a conversation with my dad early on where I think he was rightfully kind of testing, like, are you sure about this? And just like, man, God's given you some skills and abilities that I don't know that they'll be fully utilized there. And so there was, but I never did my family walk away. It was more of like, hey, if you're really, really called to this, we're going to help you test it. But if you're really, really, you have our blessing. But they didn't have, I don't come from wealth. And so there was no, the backing was kind of just like, okay, we're not standing against you. But yeah, man, there was a lot of the missions agency that I initially tried to go out of. I was actually, after going through a process, was declared unfit, unqualified for it. And it was had nothing to do with anything in me or anything I had done. And I don't hold it against that entity, but I didn't fit the bill. I didn't fit anybody's bill. So I wasn't trained enough or qualified enough to be sent as a missionary. It just didn't make sense by most people's standards. But I just had this burning thing inside that I saw the need. I saw the issues. I saw God's heart. I felt what He was putting inside of me, and I promised African brothers and sisters that no matter what I had to do, I'd come back. And so, at the end of the day, it's like I had to do it. I had to do it. There was no question. It's just, it didn't matter what people said. It was just next conversation, because I can't give up.
That's oh man, that was the best thing you could have ever said. So it's my favorite words. So there's a whole book on this subject of grit. I don't know, it's a great book. I've had a chance to read it, but it's like this thick, I'm like, it really doesn't need to be that thick. If you believe in something, you're not going to quit. If you truly believe something in your heart, and that's why I love the idea of owning a business, because obviously you want, most business owners want big fat bank accounts, and they want this growth and this way of life that comes from the success and all those great things that come with it. But at the end of the day, if you're chasing those things, you're never going to get them. You're never going to get them because you don't truly believe in those. I mean, you as a child, when you're growing up, a 5-year-old doesn't go, one day I want to be a millionaire. That's what a 25-year-old says.
Yeah.
The purity of a 5-year-old heart really, I think, is what us adults need to sometime look back and remember.
Yeah.
Because those are the things that brings joy in our lives forever, And so I love the fact that that you have so much passion and so much resiliency. And that's a question that a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, not just here in Birmingham, but everywhere, want to ask themselves, that they don't know the answer. And so at what point did you know this was going to work? And the reason I asked that question is, for someone watching this that's either contemplating starting a business or in the early days of starting a business, how could they know that they've got the heart, they've got the grit to do what you've done?
Yeah, good. I mean, that's it's a good question. There's multiple things firing off in my brain, because I do think that there's an element of sunk cost bias, right? That there's sometimes that people are continuing to move forward on something that they're really moving forward, not because they're supposed to, but it's like, well, I can't give up now. I've invested too much. And I think at the end of the day, I think both the answer for whether you should keep going, slightly shift course, or whether you should start is really is derived from that idea of purpose and calling, and like, is this something that has to happen? Is this something that I was made for? Is this something that is truly life-giving to others? And if you're moving on something that like you were made to do, and inside that it's like a sense of, man, I'm called to, I'm supposed to do this. And then your motivation in doing it, it's really is beneficial for others, this really will improve society. Like if the motivations are aligned, I was made for this, I feel called to it, it truly is going to bring value to others. And then you have that insight, you have that, like, hey, you can see it, you can see how it can do. I mean, highly likely it's just something you got to grind on, you got to push through. I think when somebody has started something or has gotten into something and it's kind of not working out, I think the opportunity there is evaluate your motivation. Because if you're just trying to turn cash, you're just trying to turn a profit, there's nothing wrong with profit. Profit's key, it's important, money's a tool. But if that's ultimately the motivation for it, and you're running up against some hard knocks, I mean, first of all, is that the right motivation? And second of all, man, maybe you should get out of it. So I think I'm a little bit off topic, but for me, it's like, will this thing outlive my life? Does it truly matter? Does it make me tick? And is it truly going to be beneficial to others? Will it truly help people? Those are key questions.
A life of purpose usually is a life with happiness. And so, if you're happy. And sometimes even these high paying jobs, I know plenty of people in the Birmingham area have these really high paying jobs and they hate them, and it's just, I always want to shake them and go, it's not too late to find that purpose in life, and all the other stuff will come. I've never found anyone that didn't do something in life that they were truly passionate about that success didn't at some point materialize. Success will always materialize, in my opinion, if you're passionate about what you're doing. It may not happen overnight. In my case, it took years, but it will find you. So one more question. Just an amazing story. And so I'd love for you to kind of go back to those early days. You talked about the craziness of I'm sure you had to live pretty lean and frugal back in those early days. Mm-hmm. But I'm also guessing that you made a few mistakes. So what was one of the bigger mistakes that you wish you could go back and redo?
Man, I've made so many mistakes, it's not even funny. So you think of a mistake, I've made it. And I'm continuing to make mistakes, but fortunately I'm failing forward, and we're learning and growing. So I think maybe something that would be of value to the listening audience, in the life cycle and the growth cycle of any entity, you reach inflection points. And as you hit that lid, you have to ask yourself, what do we have to do differently to get to the next level? Like what would it take to grow? And I truly believe that healthy things grow. And so when you look at an entity, an enterprise, a ministry, a company, the question for us is not, are we necessarily meeting all of our growth goals, but are we healthy? Like, are we as an entity operating and running effectively? And you got to have healthy systems, you got to have healthy finances, you got to have healthy people. And if you have those things, you will achieve growth. So coming back with that backdrop, we'd reached a period where the vision and the growth goals were strong, and we had accomplished a lot of great things. We had seen some momentum, but we reached this point where I was just like, man, we were hitting a lid, and I didn't fully understand why. And for me, it was, we had put growth goals ahead of health, and we had to enter a period of pause. And it was counterintuitive for me as an entrepreneur that loves growth. We had begun to leverage ourselves out. We outpaced our capacity. We didn't have great documented processes, procedures, and systems that would allow efficiency and scale. Like, so the corporate memory was locked in the mind and in the heart of people. And then when someone would be called somewhere else, or we'd ask someone to leave, it's like, well, how do you replicate, right? So all of that to say, we'd entered this period. There was some frustration. I wanted to grow further, but I was seeing, and I was working through what we're supposed to do. And I listened to a podcast, and they referenced a period where Chick-fil-A, Truett Cathy, they were trying to get ahead of, I think, Boston Chick at the time or Boston Market to get to $2 billion. And in this board meeting, he starts banging the table and he says, They said he never really did that very often, but he says all this talk about getting bigger when we should be talking about getting better. And if we get better, the market will demand we get bigger. So for me, that really crystallized and gave verbiage. And so we told our entire team, hey, look, we're going to put footprint expansion on pause for a minute. And we're going to get better before bigger. And we really outlined strategic objectives inside that, developing essential systems that span across the platform that would allow us to scale with efficiency, achieving what we call financial sustainability. Like, what's the cash reserves that we want to have on hand? What are the cash flow targets that create margin? And, what are the controls that allow us to operate with financial integrity from the standpoint that we would say, we've mitigated risk. And we also, so like we're a no debt entity. We don't carry a line of credit. We actually carry 4 months cash reserves now. We want to function with margin and yet aggression, and then people development. If we're gonna achieve like reaching millions of people, like we got to be a people producing enterprise like crazy. And so we literally took a year on each of those things. 1 full year developing essential systems across the entire platform. 1 full year working on just revenue / expense management and just that whole piece to make sure that we would, and then a full year on getting our people development paradigms, processes, tools, just all that together, onboarding, all that stuff. And so that's a lot of story, but what I would say is, what's the lesson? The lesson is, don't put growth ahead of health. Get healthy and growth will come. And if you're bent around compliance and process, you maybe need a little more of that growth stimulus. But if you're bent around the typical entrepreneur, we want to grow, we want to scale, we want to do this, don't sell the future for the present. Don't build it on a stack of cards. Like, have a healthy entity, because Truett was right. Better before bigger, right? If you get better, the market will demand that you grow bigger. They ended up getting debt free, getting their stuff together. I've spoke there 3 times. They're pushing up on 20 billion now. They're a machine. And if Truett hadn't made that decision, hadn't said we're going to put health in front of it, then who knows where they'd be. So
I love it. Systems and process, those 2 words to me, I say this all the time, they're the 2 most exciting, boring words in the dictionary.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. That's the essence of franchising. You can't have a franchise business model without both of those things, system and process. But in business, it tends to sort of be left behind. Everybody wants the fast growth and the revenue rolling in and opening the second thing and the third thing and seeing all the people being added to the org chart and all that super exciting and fun, except every now and then, in fact, most of the time, if you don't have system and process, everything crumbles. And so
that's right. Yeah.
Here's the thing though, and this is for anyone listening right now, you're hopefully going to listen to me. I didn't listen to myself. And it sounds like Micah didn't listen to himself. It seems like most entrepreneurs have to live that experience, so I wish there was this magic potion that we could spray on everyone to not make people go through that negative life experience, a negative business ownership experience, because you shouldn't have to go through the headaches. You shouldn't have to slow down for a year. You shouldn't have to live through that, because we've already walked in those shoes. We already know what the path looks like. But revenue is so fun, it's so yeah. I can understand how an entrepreneur wants to sort of take 2 steps before they really need to. But if there is one big lesson to learn, and I've heard this from plenty of other people, Micah, is think about the future now.
That's right. Yeah.
Instead of just sort of playing it, by ear as the business grows day by day. So Micah,
it's because it's not giving up on growth. Healthy things grow.
Absolutely. This has been a phenomenal experience for me. I've heard this story more than one time. You don't know that, but I've sort of stalked you. And it's just as inspiring today, if not more inspiring than the other few times that I've had a chance to hear you talk about your life. I'm honored to know you. I'm honored to have a chance to learn from you today. And I know that everyone listening feels the same way. I'd love for anyone around the Birmingham area to have a chance to connect with you, interact with you, even participate in Vapor Ministries worldwide. So what can they do to do that today?
Yeah, a couple of things. If you do the whole social thing, follow me on at Micah McElveen Instagram. If you go to the bio and Facebook and all that type of stuff too, if you go to the bio link, there's actually a free documentary you can download called Alive to Live, and it will encourage you. It's incredibly well done. We've got some great other pieces coming out, but check out that documentary. It's captivating. Alive to Live. We also have a book coming out fourth quarter this year, Dying for Purpose. Would love to get a copy of that in listeners' hands. So, and you can check us out at vaporministries.org. And if you feel so inclined to participate, there's ways to do that there. So,
I'm not from the Birmingham area originally, but I'm proud to be a resident here. I'm proud to raise a family here. I'm proud to build a business here. But I'm also proud to be a fellow entrepreneur along people like you. You're a hero to a lot of people, and you're right here in the Birmingham, Alabama area. And so that's a pretty big deal considering all the other communities that are around us that appear to be much bigger. You're here, you've chosen to be here, and you're impacting lives worldwide and locally. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And I hope to keep following you and participating alongside you with the ministry. So thank you so much, Micah, and we'll talk again down the road.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate you. Thanks for what you're doing.